Rob, you want to do your trash talk now?
I am trashing Chris. Not Dan Campbell,
Really?
but Lions fans who have accepted losing and have been brainwashed so much because of all the losing, Chris. They don't even know when their coach is bad. Like
He's not a bad coach.
He's
That's
a bad
ridiculous.
coach on Sunday. He was a bad coach on Sunday. And what the bad part is.
So he had a bad day.
Okay, but my point is that they've had such bad, fortunes for a long time that even when you were on the cusp of making a Super Bowl and all you needed your coach was to do, not be extraordinary or do something that's never been done before, was to manage the game that was in front of him and what he was watching, and he couldn't do it. He's almost become a caricature or a shtick. Like, I'm the guy who goes for it on fourth down no matter what the situation is. That's what he's been turned into, and that'll get you fired. Because that's how Brandon Staley got fired. He kept doing it.
He's way better than Brandon Staley.
But he kept doing it. I'm just telling you, watch.
I mean, we'll see, but Brandon Staley didn't have half the accomplishments that Dan Campbell did. So, all right, let's go to the NBA, Rob. And interesting story by John Hollinger, former colleague of ours at ESPN, and used to be in the front office for the Memphis Grizzlies. But
so there's a number of guys who are sports writers who turned into GMs. You know that?
David Kahn was in Minnesota.
I remember David Kahn very vividly as a writer.
Yep. None of them really made their mark in the front office.
In baseball, they did.
Neither Hollinger or Kahn did.
Fred Clare was the former GM of the Dodgers, Chris. They won World Series. Fred Clare, I think they won one at least. And Frank Cashin, who was the Mets GM when the Mets won in '86. He was a Baltimore sports writer who turned into a GM.
Any brothers made that jump?
Good question.
I don't think so.
I
can think of. Wonder why.
Yeah, I don't know.
All right. Anyway, we're getting to the NBA, Rob, and this article by Hollinger was talking about this scoring explosion. Now check this out, Rob. If you haven't been paying attention, scoring is way up in the NBA, not only among teams, but individual players. All right. So here, listen to this, Rob. This is incredible. From the start of the game, the first 7 decades of the history of the NBA, this was up until January of 2023, Rob.
All right.
7 decades, 70 years, only 6 players had ever scored 70 or more points in an NBA game. Okay. 6. It's happened 4 times since January 2023 and twice in the last 2 weeks. Luke had 73. Embiid had 70 recently. And so that's just one of the examples. But scoring is way up, which is it's good to have offense. But you don't want it to become, teams essentially scoring all the time. And they're not scoring all the time. The percentage of points or possessions they're scoring on is only slightly higher than it's been in the past. But it's the three-pointers, Rob. The teams are taking essentially about 40% of their shots are from three. So that's almost half your shots are now worth 3 points instead of 2. So that's one reason scoring's up. And then because of the threat of the 3, defenses are stretched out to the limit, right? Because they're guarding the 3-point line. Once you beat your defender, which is easy to do if you got handle, and these dudes got handle, and you can't hand check, Rob. So they can beat you off the dribble, and then it's easy to get to the bucket and score. And scoring on 2-point shots, Rob, is way up because teams aren't really taking nearly as many long mid-range jumpers. They're getting all the way to the hole or in the paint or short mid-rangers. So the offenses have become really good and efficient. But the question is all of this scoring good for the game? Rob, baseball. That's your sport. I mean, we all love the home runs, right? With triples, exciting plays, stolen bases. But you don't want softball out there, right? You don't want 15.
Nobody wants softball.
Regular games of 15 to 12. So where are you at on this scoring spree in the NBA?
Chris, I got to admit, I understand the NBA wanted to improve the scoring. They were tired of the Pistons and 70 points and all that. I understood that. But what we're watching now defensively, where you can't do anything to players, and it's a free-for-all. All the European players have told us it's so easy to score in the NBA, and we have seen it. And what this game has turned into, you heard Steve Kerr recently just say how this is just enough is enough. Chris, it's almost unwatchable night after night. How many nights are we doing our radio show and the update we get from Steve or somebody, and somebody's down by 35 points in the first half?
The blowouts, that's a whole nother
I'm just saying,
yeah,
but
blowouts are tough to watch.
It is just, I don't think it's a good product just to have scoring. And I'm not saying we want to go back to 70 points. I don't want to go back to 70, but I don't like this NBA. I don't like all of these points, and it's so easy, and defenders are at a disadvantage, and they can't do anything to defend. That used to be a skill that was big, Chris, and the Dennis Rodmans and Ben Wallaces, and people would roll up their sleeves. And you know what I mean? And dig in.
Like Jordan and, even some of the best offensive players. Even LeBron was a great defender in his heyday.
Right? And dig in, Chris. It's okay. We used to talk about the NBA all the time, Chris, in the playoffs. Sometimes games came down to what? Getting a stop at the end.
And it's not that they aren't putting forth effort on defense, Rob. I think they've just... offenses have become incredibly efficient, and they build everything around that three-point line. And these guys are shooting it well and hitting the shots. And, again, because the floor is so spaced, you beat your man, which is easy to do when they can't hand guard you, right? Hand check you. And now it's just a free-for-all at the rim. So I hear you. I've said for a long time, it wasn't necessary. I didn't see this is the reason that scoring would be way up. I just didn't. I think there's a threshold, and I don't know that we've hit it, but Rob, I think there's I don't know what it even is, but there's a threshold where when you take so many threes, the game becomes junky. It becomes a caricature of itself. Mm-hmm. We've seen that with the All-Star game, right? The All-Star game is not fun to watch. Now, I know they're not defending hard in that, but still, they shoot so many threes that it's just a joke. My answer to that, Rob, and I think it would help in this regard as far as the scoring too, would be to cut off the three-point line at either, it's an arc.
I know you said it before in the corners.
Right, yeah. But I don't know if you cut it off at the free throw line extended or if you want to just cut it off, where the arc ends and it becomes a straight line. But basically, you're eliminating that corner and side three. And to me, what that does is because you can't just put 5 minutes or 3 or 4 minutes the 3-point line anymore and run high pick and roll and then kick it out to them or ISO like that. What it would do is it would bring back post play. It would bring back mid-range game, and you still would have the 3-pointers. I think, Rob, all sports are better when there's a balance. We talked about it with baseball.
Got to be a balance.
Want all home runs.
We don't want all
strikeouts,
strikeouts,
right?
and they made changes, Chris.
Right,
to make it so that we got
more stolen bases
and hit and run and no shift, and we got guys on the base pass. And the brand of baseball was better this past year. There's no doubt about it. No doubt.
Football, we don't want 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
But
and
we don't want
the
them to
arena
pass.
league.
Right. We don't want arena football where you throw on every down and everything is a race to the sticks. Just run.
Yep. And I think it's the same thing here. You don't want all threes and layups or dunks. You want a variety of the game. I mean, you essentially, in a lot of cases, they're taking out parts of the floor because guys are being taught in some franchises not to shoot mid-range jumpers or certainly long twos. So I think that, in my view, that's something that they might want to look at. I'm not as down on the product as you, but there does need to be some tweaking at the very least because, like we said, right, this isn't even what the article's about, but there seem to be way more blowouts than ever.
Chris, that's the other part, and you're right. But even the number that he came up with, doing the research about 7 decades and only that's 6 incredible. Players had done it, and now, like you got four in the last year. In the last year, four when it was 6 and 7 decades. And then 2 in the last 2 weeks. Those are incredible numbers, but the blowouts, and Chris, you talk about it on a nightly basis when I'm belly aching about the game, and it's because if you're hitting your threes and you have a bad night with threes, you are down by 30, Chris. You have a bad night shooting threes.
In a lot of cases, there's no doubt. Yeah, so I also think, Rob, that the style of play, as far as some teams, the ball's always in one guy's hands. And he is going to, if you have the ball in your hands all the time, your numbers are going to be outrageous. And Luka Doncic he scored 73. He's one of those guys, especially when Kyrie's not there, who was, injured that game. It's always in his hands. Chauncey Billups once told me when Chauncey was working at ESPN, this was about a decade ago, maybe a little longer. He said, look, this is when the point guards were really starting to put up these crazy numbers, and it was looking like, man, this is the best era of point guards ever. He said, man, if I dribbled the ball for 15 to 20 seconds and then either took the shot or passed it to the guy that was going to take the shot, my numbers would have been crazy too. But that's not the best way to win. So I also think that's a part of it, Rob. So many of these teams revolve around 1 or 2 players doing everything.
And Chris,
and that's what we said with the Lakers. If they got a 25-point score, he ain't getting 25 with them.
No, it won't happen. And
so, yeah.
Yeah, no, Chauncey's right, too. And that would have never happened with Larry Brown as coach. I'm just telling you.
No.
Never.
No. So those are, a lot of the things that are happening.